Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Sarah Mitchell, head of our documentation department. Today's Sarah's presentation is going to be on style and on class, two things I know we all have lots of, but probably could learn a little bit more about. So she's going to be diving into those CSS properties that can make your applications look stunning. I'd also like to remind you that we're here to answer your questions as well, and you could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Sarah, are you there?
I am here.
Fantastic. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And you should see a dialog box on your screen. Oh, and I can see your screen.
What do you see?
It says Cascading Style Sheets. Did I come to the right presentation today?
Yay.
All right,
got the
excellent.
right screen too. It didn't even
Fantastic.
give me a choice.
It just knew. It's fine.
It just knew. It just knew. Yeah. All right. Start the slideshow. All right. Yep. As Dave mentioned today, we're going to talk about cascading style sheets. It's the topic that I know a lot of people struggle with and wish they knew more. And so today we're finally going to start addressing that in this webinar. And today I'm going to talk about declaration properties. And you will know what that means in a few slides. But before I do that, I wanted to just sort of cover as a reminder, like what an app is when you build an app with Alpha Anywhere. And it's HTML, it's CSS, and it's JavaScript. And it's also XBasic. We're not talking about that today. But so on the browser side, where your client is viewing the app, the HTML is your content. The JavaScript is all the interaction with your app, all the pop-up windows, changing screens. And the CSS is the look and the feel, the colors, the fonts, the padding, the spacing, all that stuff. So what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And from Wikipedia here, this is their definition here. It's a language for describing the presentation of your document. And that document is usually written up as HTML. So it describes, CSS describes colors, it describes where things are positioned on the screen, and gives your application a great look from the basic default layout that a website would have if you didn't do any of that. So with regards to Alpha Anywhere, where do we use CSS? We use it everywhere. It's in the web theme, which contains all the definitions for all the controls that we have in the UX component, how they're positioned, their colors, their fonts, their placement, all that's, it's in the web theme. You use it in an inherited style, which is based off of a web theme, but has some extra information in it. You use it in style tweaks, which tweak your current web theme by adding a sub theme or changing a class definitions. Maybe you change your button class so it has borders on it instead of none by default. It's used in color palettes, kind of loosely. There you use the CSS color properties to define your colors. So your hex values, your RGBA values, that's where CSS is used when you define your color palettes. It's used in sub-themes, which are variations of how a control can look. And the best example we've got in Alpha is the button. Button has lots of sub-themes. It's got the base sub-theme, which every single control in Alpha has, but it also has confirm and deny, which are different colors. Confirm is green, deny is red. We have pill-shaped buttons that have rounded edges. We have buttons that have drop shadows on them, and so on and so forth. CSS is also used in component CSS, which is a property in your components where you can define classes. And classes are CSS rules that you can then assign to your controls, your control properties and the class settings. Or in your controls, you can inline CSS with those properties directly And you can also externally link style sheets into your application through a variety of ways, both within the component itself individually, and we also have a way to link style sheets in globally across your entire application. I'm not going to get in that today because I believe I have way more content than we have time to cover. But I have talked about all of these things in the past, and I will be giving you guys some resources at the end and where you can go to find those past webinars where we've talked about some of this other stuff. But this is everywhere. You can use CSS and alpha apps, and it's not just web applications, it's mobile apps too. All of the work that you do in CSS will apply to both. So getting back to CSS, what is CSS? This is a picture of a rule, and it just sort of shows you everything that is in a CSS rule, all the parts of that language. And this is a really, really good diagram that I found on Iron, down here at the bottom. Iron. I cannot say that today. Anyway, this is Iron Ion.
Iranian.
Yeah. Anyway, and the author of the particular blog post where I found this written in 2015, his name is Khan, and I'm just wondering if he might be related to Khan Academy. I haven't dug into it yet, but that's a great place to go and take classes on all sorts of cool things. But basically, CSS class, which we've looked at in the past, has a number of elements. It has your selector. This one, it's A. And in this case, the selector is the HTML element A. A selector could be a class name. It could be an ID, which is preceded by the hashtag. It could also be an asterisk, which would be everything. This next thing, the colon following after, this is a pseudo class. And we've talked about this in the past briefly. But this particular selector says if it's an anchor element and the action is hover, then it will apply this block declaration. So everything inside of this green box is the declaration, and a declaration is one or more properties and values. So it's got two properties in here as background color assigned to this shade of gray, and a font family, which is a list of fonts in order of preference from the one you actually want to use to the one okay, fine, we'll use sans serif if you don't have any of these others. So that's the value for the font family. This is the value for the background color. And today what we're going to look at are properties. We're going to look at some common properties that are very useful to know, that I encourage you to know. But it's not all of them, and it's certainly not all of the ones you should know, because there's a lot of CSS rules. So previously I mentioned where we use CSS. And we use it in two ways in Alpha Anywhere. You either specify your CSS as a class or some sort of selector with the declaration block within it, or you inline it directly as just the properties and values. So to really get into the properties at this point, I've got a few properties here that I feel are important to know, that are very useful and will help you kind of understand what's going on in some of our web themes when you go and look at them, and also help you try to figure out like where space is located or isn't located, or where you want to remove it. So this first slide, these are generic properties that deal with, I'm going to say control, but it is really box of the element. So it's margin, padding, display, width, and height. So margin and padding are space around the control. Margin is the space on the outside of the control. And padding is on the space within the control, but still on the outside edges. And the easiest way to kind of remember where these two space elements are located is margin is on the outside of the border and padding is on the inside of the border. So if your element has a border and your content's all squished up against the border, you probably need more padding. If your content has a border and it's all squished up against everything else, you probably need more margin. Likewise, the opposite is true. If it feels like that border is way too out there from your content, you can make it smaller. Same with the margin. Display is how an element is treated with regard to its layout and also for its children. And over the years, display has gotten really powerful and really cool in what you can do with it. I want to show a little bit of how the block and the inline and also none work today. But in going forward, I highly encourage everyone to go and look at display and learn more about how you can use it to flex layouts, grid layouts, table layouts, where you can get content to behave like a table, and then also flow, which is a new thing that's kind of replacing the inline block, old syntax of the property. And then finally, width and height, the width of the control, the height of the control, but also the minimum width, how small should this be, and the maximum, how big can it be, to kind of help constrain how things grow and shrink in your apps when you have to target multiple devices. Next set of properties I want to look at are background, background color, background image are the two big ones. Your borders, border radius, which is separate from border in a way. Box shadow, which is a property that allows you to put a shadow behind or within your content. And opacity, which controls how opaque or transparent the entire content block is. So can you see through it? Which is opacity is something that's used in color definitions often, so that you can put like a white background on something but still be able to see through it, see the image behind it. And then finally, I want to look at fonts. Everything you see here is related to font or text in some way. Font family is the font that's used, the style, whether or not it is bold or not bold, whether or not it's italicized or oblique, font weight, the boldness of it, text decoration, does it have an underline, does it have an overline, the color of the font, overflow, which applies to the whole block of content itself. Overflow specifies what should happen if the stuff you have in your element grows beyond the size that you've given it. White space covers how to treat things. Do you want your text to wrap? Do you want it not to wrap? Do you want it to only create a new line if the markup within it literally has a carriage return in it? And then direction, which you will not see very often unless you're doing multilingual apps that have to deal with both left to right and right to left languages. But direction just defines the flow of content. Does the content in this website, should it flow from left to right, which you see in your English, Spanish, French, or should it flow right to left, which you see in Arabic languages? So without further ado, we got to get into a live demo and start playing with this. And what I really want to teach you guys today is how to figure out what you need to do to get the look you want. And we're just going to focus on using some of these properties. And what I've got here set up already is just a view box in a panel card. And inside this view box, I've connected it to the Farmington products table in our Farmington database. And I'm going to delete this real quick. So I'll show you that data source. We're connected to Farmington, and we're going to work with products today. Products has some images in it. What I want to do with this is on the layout here, I'm going to go to Freeform Editor. I'm going to load one of these templates from the library. I'm going to pick this front of card, back of card. So this is a fun template. It's got some animation and it looks really cool. But the basic configuration with just color might not be everything you want to do or everything you want to show here. So when you load this template up, you're going to have two divs in here that say put card contents here. So one for the front and one for the back. And I'm just going to replace these with some of the content from Farmington. I'm going to insert the product name on the front, and on the back I'm going to put the description. I'm gonna click OK. Make sure this is set to fill container. I've put it in a panel card. And now I'm gonna go into working preview. So this is that template default out of the box. You click on this button icon, it's gonna flip back and forth. And apparently just for the first one. Anyway, so what I want to do with this, I want to put a picture of the product for the background on the front, and on the back, I want to do something with this content. I want to center it better. And if you notice here, everything's all crammed together, and I would like to add more space around that. So before I go back into alpha and just start inserting CSS and hope that it works, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to open the Chrome debugger. And if you don't have these Chrome options down here, you're probably going to see the word Internet Explorer next to the word using. And what you need to do is click on that and click on the Chrome button. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to minimize this a little bit, make some more space. And for those of you who have never seen this before, this is the Chrome debugger. It's got a bunch of tools in it for inspecting the layout of your app, the HTML. It's also got some debugging in it. So if you're having JavaScript issues, the console is a great place to go to learn more about where those errors might be happening. But today what we're going to primarily be using this for is to look at the CSS that's being assigned to these elements in here. I'll open that back up. So I'm going to click on this boxy arrow icon up here. And then I'm going to mouse over this. I'm going to click on it. Click on the Chrome debugger again to bring it back. And then take a look at what we've selected. So you notice here as I'm moving this mouse around, it's highlighting the element I'm currently looking at. And what I want to start with here is this, the front of the card. The card layout has two div elements in it. One is class front, the other one is class back. And then the inner contains the actual content that appears within there. And there's also this div tag that has a button inside of it that is the icon that you click to rotate the card. So I'm going to start here, and what I want to do is I want to change the style background color to use an image instead. And the best way to kind of get started and try to figure out what it is that you're doing is to find that element here in the debugger, and then you go over here in this styles tab in this layout and find this element.style and start editing. So I know if I go back and I look at web projects here and we look inside the applications file directory, if I go in here, I know I have a folder called products and it's got all these images in it, and we're working with this tomato sun gold thing. So what I'm going to do here is just quickly grab the file name by copying it, and I'm going to close that, go back in here, reopen the debugger, and I'm going to change this background color. Well, I'll keep it for now. I'm going to hit tab twice, which adds a new rule, and then I'm going to say background image URL, and I know this is in products, and that's the image. Let's see if I can get that to work. I might have to give it a few more rules. Background. So background, with the one I'm working with, it has all these little properties in here. It's got position, size, repeat, and so on and so forth. So do size, cover. See position, center. And it's possible this isn't loading because I'm in working preview and it may not know about this. So background might not be the best example to show here, but I do know that's where those are at. The other thing that I know that I want in here is I want the whole card to have more space. So if I go up to the card here, if you go to computed tab in here, you can see sort of the padding and the border and the margin that's here, and it doesn't have any padding, it doesn't have any margin. So if we just sort of experimented with like adding more margin to the box, you can see how that creates this space. It offsets it from these other guys, and that's what you want. You don't want these all crammed together. You want a little bit of breathing room. If I wanted more space, maybe I don't want that the tomatoes at the top to be the text to be so tight. I could do something similar with the not on the card, but on the content within here. So if we go down here, we find the front, class inner. Let's try it here. There we go. So I've got a little bit of space here. When you mouse over there, it shows you what that value is. If I go back up to the card where I've added that inline margin, it shows you where that is with the orange. If you come back over here to computed, it's going to display the width. It's going to show you what that margin is. I've come back down here to the front. There's my padding. There's the original size that was given. So I like what the size stuff. I like the margin. I like the padding. So what I can do now, you can actually just copy this. You can select it all. You can Control C, open up like Notepad or something, and paste in all those rules so that you know what you were doing when you go back into Alpha Anywhere and add that stuff into your layout. So I think we have enough here that we want to add these changes now before going further and working out some of the text. And also let's go take a look more at this URL and get that working.
Sarah, just a quick question for you. How were you able to extract all those changes you just made and put them into Notepad? I know you probably just showed
so
me.
you can, so you can just highlight it in that style preview window. So go back into the Chrome debugger here and select this, open that up. I can just go in here. You can go to anything. You just click and drag like you're in a text editor, and then you can copy it.
So I would think that would come out all weird, but it actually knows what it's supposed to do. You know, when you
It's very, very handy.
Wow.
Another really cool thing that you can do in here when you're working in sources, like say you've got a CSS style sheet that you've linked in externally and you want to make some tweaks, you can come in here into sources and open it up and just start editing it directly. And when you're done, and you have to do this in the Chrome browser, you can't do it here. But when you're done, you can actually just save it. You can save that modified file from the browser somewhere like on your desktop. And now you've got it. And then you can just go copy it back into your app wherever you want to replace it, and you're good to go. You're done. So
that's handy.
It's really cool, the kind of things you can do from here. So these fun little, they're just like time savers. So you don't have to sit there and like manually type out what you did. You can just copy it.
So you just copy that, and when you paste it again, when you pasted that into Notepad, it turned it back into CSS, like you see here, nicely formatted and ready to go.
Well, it's just text here, and I don't like the spacing. Like I'll always go in here. I'm like, get rid of this.
I gotcha. Yep.
Right, but like that's a thing you can do with these editors, and it's really handy. So
cool. So you can put that back into Alpha Anywhere. So I think that's where you're headed.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to show, right? I've copied this off because I want to go back in here into the design tab, into my view box, double click that, go over to the layout and find that card that we had earlier. So there's the card, there's that width and that height. I want to put that margin in there. So I just need the margin, the width and the height are already there. So I'm going to copy that here, paste it there. And then for this front card on the background, I'm gonna put all this stuff in there. I'm gonna put it on a single line first though, because this is all. I'm gonna get rid of background color actually. There we go. Copy that. And there's a little bit of more work I need to do here to edit that, but I'll put those in here. I need to replace this with the actual URL to the image. But before I do that, I'm going to go grab that padding and add that at the end. So this didn't work, and there's probably a number of reasons why it didn't work, but what I was trying to do was get a background image in here of the product. So when you're working in this inline style here, if you want to do background image in this interface, you can use the single quote. I did try using like an escape double quote when I was preparing for this presentation, and what I found was that did not work. It generated some weird output, and I don't know if that's just I escaped it wrong or what, but the single quote totally works, and it works within double quotes for the style tag or style attribute. So products is the folder where all those images for my products are stored, but the image I want to use is stored in a field. Image large is what I want to use here. And then just so that we can experience working with those properties, I'm going to take them out. So I want to display the image on the background. I want to have some padding. And I'm not going to worry about any of this other stuff right now. So I'm going to click OK, save my changes, and go back into working preview and take a peek. And I know, I'm doing something wrong in my images, aren't I? Products. You know what? Let's use live preview. It's loading my images here.
Very good.
All right. I'm not 100% sure why working preview didn't load the images. Working and live preview are totally different things. But let's continue forward here. So I'm going to open the Chrome debugger again, and then same explanation as previously. If you don't see Chrome down here, it probably is using Internet Explorer. You just need to change it. But this is the same debugger. Has all that we saw in working preview. So what I want to do now is let's take a look at this sun gold cherry tomatoes. So I've added that background image in, and it's quite large. I think it's like 400 pixels wide. So you can do a lot with background. You can specify an image, you can specify a color. And with regards to the images, there's a bunch of properties you can use to specify how the image is displayed. How is it tiled? Is it centered? Does it repeat? Does it only repeat in the X direction or the Y direction? Is it anchored to the top, the bottom, so on and so forth. So for this one, I want the background image to fit. I want it to be inside the bounds of the whole object. So that's the background size property. And this can be a physical size. It can also be these two values. There's one called contain and there's one called cover. So contain will shrink it down so the whole image fits within the size of the object. And as you can see here, my images are square, but my box is a rectangle. So it's repeating to fill up the entire background. The other option in here is cover, which will make the image large enough in whatever direction it needs to cover the whole space. So if your element's shape is slightly different from your image, one of those X or Y values is going to flow off the top or the side. So I like cover, but let's go back to contain. And let's look at background repeat. When you're working with images on backgrounds, if they're too small or the box is too big, it might repeat. And you can control how that gets repeated. You can say, don't repeat it. So then it's only shown once. But you can also, there's these other options in here, which are really cool. So you could do like a repeat X or repeat Y. Round space, I have no idea what they do. Oh, it looks like round rounds off the sizes so they fit. That's clever. So, but there's a bunch you can do in here. A common technique used in JavaScript games is to put all your image assets in one file and then use this background size, repeat, and image to position that image file on the thing you want to show, like maybe it's a tree or your animation sprite. And people do that because it reduces the number of assets you have to download. And it only requires loading one image into the browser. So you don't have to have a bunch of all these other files. So that's a use in oh, I don't want repeat, I want no repeat. That's a common use that I've seen. But it might also have applications in, maybe you've got icons that you want to display and you put them all in one file. So this is a way you can get them out. Another good property here is the position. And this just specifies how the background image is placed. So you can put on the bottom, in the center, on the top. Because this is on contain, it's just going to appear centered, which is actually what I want. And then the other thing here too, you see how there's like, you can see through the back of the card here, you can see that text that's back there because there's no other background color here. So you can use a background image with the background color. So if I make that white, it's now hidden. And like I said, once you're satisfied with this stuff, you can come in here and just copy it, paste it in here, and then go back and add it back into your app where you want to add it. So while we're here, I also want to take a look at this text up here, which is no longer readable because we've got a very colorful image behind it and the text is black and not readable against a dark background. So I'd like to fix that here. And the way I'm going to do that is basically by giving this element a background color. But I'm also going to give it opacity so you can still see through it. And opacity is it's a value between 0 and 1. And it defines how transparent or opaque the object is. If it's 0, you're going to be able to see through it completely. If it's 1, that's the default behavior. You can't see through it at all. So I could make this like 0.0, oops, 0.8. Here we go. So that has given, you can see the text, but you can see the image behind it as well. That 80% is the way you can think about it. It's 80% opaque. And that's not just the background color, that's the whole thing. It's the text, it's all of it, everything in that box. And so that's a way to kind of layer things together and give it more depth. The other thing I want to do here is the height of this element. It just feels too tall. So I'm going to make that like 20 pixels and see if that works. It might not work because I might have to put it on the inner up here. And that's not working here. So I'm going to move that height. I'm going to get rid of it here by unchecking it. Go up to my inner class, click on this element style to add a new one, see if that affects it. It does. So I know I need to go and change the height on the wrapper around my content if I want it to be shorter, but still have that background on the inner class. And then on the, oops, oh no. Oh, just for anybody who just saw that and had a question, I click and you can like move stuff around in this view while you're in here, but undo works. So I hit Control-Z to get back where I was. Where am I? Front, inner. So there's the inner, and then on the content within that, I've added a background color and some opacity. So I'll copy that out, go find my notepad, paste that in, and then up here, copy the height. Paste that in here, and then go back to alpha and update the design. So we'll go back into our view box. think I double clicked it. Whoop, there it goes. And then I'm going to find one, we did some work on our background image. So I'm going to find that here. And we already have the image URL. We've set that up. So what we need to do instead is add in all this background size, repeat position, and color. So I'll just put these in here one at a time. Get the center. And put that background color in there as well. We already have the padding, which you can see here at the end. The other two things was I wanted to make this div shorter, so I'm going to add the style tag to it. There we go. And go back to my notepad and find that height that we'd given it. In reality, I might make that much bigger just because it felt so tight when we were looking at it. The other one that we need to do is on our product, and that's just in this div. So we need to go to this div and also add that style and paste those two things in. And while I'm doing this, I want to explain why I'm presenting it to you guys like this. This is how I feel is the best way to get started when you're trying to figure out how you want to style your app, what you want to brand, what you want to change. Start as local as you can go. In this case, it's in literal HTML in the view box. But if you're working with like a button, there is an inline CSS style for that button that you could work with. So work as local as you can. And then once you figure out what you want, what you like, at that point, you start moving your styles out of those local locations and moving them up as high as you need to take them. So I feel like this looks pretty good. I'm noticing now that that arrow is up here instead of on the bottom. So I might need to move that back down. Or perhaps move around the background color and give this more of a box within that larger size. But notice now that just working with that top element, I'm starting to get closer to what I want. And it's working for everything. It's working for all these products down here. It's working for these white button mushrooms, which also had the dark background. And the cool thing about the white on white is that you can't even tell that we did that. So I like that. Let's figure out quickly how to move that arrow down. And we're going to grab this little selector tool again. We're going to select this box, open the Chrome debugger again, and go take a look at it. That's pretty low level. This button is inside a bunch of other stuff. So let's see here. I see. Okay. So before we had this height was pushing down this button all the way to the ground. I think it's because of this class. So I want to know more about this inner class. So I'm going to select this element and go over here and find it. And if you look here, there's an inner, and it had like this height property. So if we uncheck the height we gave it, we'll see that it pushed that button all the way down, some 100%, maybe not, yeah, some 100% value. So I'm feeling like perhaps we need the height here on this element and not here, so that it continues to push that that button all the way down to the bottom. And I'm noticing that it's just not giving me the height that I want. So I'm wondering if it's this flex. So if I uncheck that and go down the line until I get rid of all of them, it's that flex. But without the flex, that arrow doesn't go to the bottom either. So I want to keep that. So maybe what really needs to happen here is I need another HTML element around this guy so that the div and the flex stuff all continues to work, but I can still have that background and that opacity without having to try to figure out how to reposition this arrow at the bottom where it's currently at. So let's try that. Let's go back into our design and find where we had this div, and we'll just Control X that out and just put another div in here. And we'll move that height down too. And get rid of that style. And we'll just see if that works. And it did. Look at that.
Cool.
Pull that back open. So there's our header. The main inner content is still as tall as it needs to be, and our button's still at the bottom. So before I continue further down the rabbit hole on some of these other properties, are there any questions at this point?
There aren't questions specifically on what you covered. There's, let's see, at least, actually, there is one. One is that under settings, it says it has live preview set to Chrome, but always seems to open in IE. Do you know how you get it to stay in Chrome? In other words,
It should remember,
yeah.
but there might be a setting in the view settings. So let's go take a look at view settings,
All right.
and then probably preferences.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. Nope, not there.
Hmm.
I'm not 100% sure where it is hidden in here. Maybe it's live preview. Oh, it is live preview. So if you go into view, settings, preferences, which is in the system drop down, and then live preview, you can change the default here. But also, if you change it while you're in it, it should remember what you picked. So
Great. And while you're paused, I do have one CSS question, and it's a good one. I've heard it actually asked a couple of times. And it has to do with, you know how you can set things in pixels, and we tend to do that a lot, but
yeah.
a lot of times things will be defaulted to inches, even in our own builders. And it just seems strange. Like I understand pixels because, you know, it depends on how many pixels you fit on a screen, and screen sizes are measured in pixels. You know, 1920 by 1080 is HD for pixels. How do inches work? It seemed to me as I was researching it, but I was maybe have more information that it has to do with sort of what a property called a display viewport has been set to and what it thinks your dots per inch should be. And that could be changed from, okay. Would you
Yeah,
mind?
that can be changed. Inches is gonna approximate whatever the device or browser tells your app an inch is. In
So I
terms of
was thinking
pixels,
it
that's what
seemed
it
like a
numbers at.
pretty typical default for that is 96 dpi. So when it says 1 inch, you can think 96 pixels, which
Yeah, but if
does
you're on like
feel
an iPhone where the
that's
pixel
gonna be different. Yeah.
like bananas,
Yeah.
it's not it's not. It's much higher.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, these are in inches because that's the default, but you can certainly change it to be pixels
Yeah.
or ems or ns or viewport, view height, view widths. There's a bunch of really cool settings in
Yep.
there. So
Great.
the last thing I want to show here is just moving this stuff out into a class. So I need to keep this property here, this background image property, inlined in the style because it uses a value from the data itself. But everything else here could be moved off into a class. I could remove this with Control Exit. We'll go find class front. And this stuff is all on the CSS tab. If you've inserted from this template library, the CSS will be over here. But I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find front, and I'm seeing that front is hooked to back. It's they're joined together. So what I need to do here actually is make a new rule for front. And I'm gonna put that down on the bottom, just so that front, these rules are applied. The way CSS works is whatever the last rule that gets loaded, it wins. So if you've got a bunch of different rules that all set like your padding, they're all front, whatever gets loaded last is going to be what gets used. So I'm going to put this in here for the front. I'm going to go back to my layout, and I want to pull out this style here, and I'm going to call this class product label, and go create that product label on the CSS tab after front. Whoop. Paste that in there. So there's my background color, the opacity, the height. If I wanted to, I could put padding in here to give it some more wiggle room. But I think that's going to be good enough for now. And I believe that's everything we've added here. If I was working in a button and I wanted to move those rules up higher to affect all my buttons, instead of placing it here and the UX for this control, I would actually go up to the UX component level. And we could actually go look at that now. I'm going to make a new component for that. Add a button using add control. I'll say a button. We'll just keep, compute. I'm going to use base here, our favorite. And then what I want to show here is getting the border on all your buttons. And this is just going to be at the component level. So let's go take a look at this button in live preview. Let's open up the debugger and take a peek at what's in it. Minimize that. So here, I'll grab that handy selector tool again, and I'm going to click my button, and I'll click Open Chrome Debugger again, so this comes back into focus. And this is the button code that was generated for our button. It's got a class, and it has a little bit of inline styling. And what I want to point out here, because I'm thinking about changing all my buttons, is the button class. So class equals button. If we go over here, you can actually find this in the style. So at the top is the element.style attribute. But if you look in here, you can also see class rules that are being assigned because it's a button. It's a pulse button. So when you click on it, it does a little animation. And it's also a button. So there's your color, your background, your font weight, your border. It doesn't have a border. And I want to change that. So I would find this border property, go over here, and I'll say like it's got a 2-pixel border. It's solid, and let's use that same fabulous teal color that we see up here at the top. Hit tab. So there's a little bit of investigating here using the debugger. I found this class. I want to put that border on there. I want it to be 2 pixels solid. But most importantly, I'd like to apply this to every single button I add that uses this theme. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to remember that it was called .button. I'm going to go back into design. I'm going to go over to properties. I'm going to scroll down in here and find the CSS section right here and locate the local CSS definitions. And I'll add button. There we go. There's my border. Click OK. Go back to live preview. And now it's got a border. And if we go back and we look at it in the debugger, you'll see that's the original class definition we were working with. But here's a new one, and this is the one that we added. So This, every time this component is loaded on a page, and that's important to know because pages can have multiple components, it's going to add this CSS rule, and it's going to say anything that's got the button class will have a border that's 2 pixels solid in this fabulous teal color. And so we can prove that in here by going into controls, and we'll add a bunch of buttons. Another button. And let's add one more button. And these are all using that base subtheme. So by default, they wouldn't have a border. But now that I've added that rule into my component, every time I add one of those buttons, they're going to get that property, and I don't need to worry about it. It's going to automatically be there. And if at some point down the road I'm like, no, I really don't like that teal color. I want to make it gray. I only have to edit it in one place. I can come here. I can delete that. I can right click. There's a genie insert color. If you select text value, you get the fabulous color picker. And maybe we want more like a salmon from Venice. There we go. And that inserts the color for me. Click OK. Live preview. And done. There's our salmon teal buttons. And that border will always be there. Doesn't matter what the action is. For these other things, suppose you wanted your border color to change when you hovered, you'd have to add a hover rule, which gets into CSS. You could either do it through the CSS pseudo classes, or you can dig into our web theme builder here, which you can find under the More menu, Web Style Builder. And then we'll take a look at Farmington because that's what's being used here. Wait for it to load. Go find so this is a copy of the alpha theme. I recommend copying the alpha theme just to sort of learn what's in here. But if we go find button, you'll see that it has a button hover, button press, button disabled. These other class names are what are applied when those actions happen. So if you wanted to have a different border when those happened, you would add those class name rules to your component and specify the border there. Another thing that does come up a bit frequently is how to wrap text in a list or not wrap text in a label. In the case of the list, we do have a built-in property for those controls, which you can change the word wrap on. And I want to point that out because it has come up quite frequently from a number of different people in recent history. So let's add a list. I'm going to just put static sample data in it, because I don't need to show you a layout. I just need to show you where the property is. So it's down here. It's in the client side section. It's called word wrap. And if you check it, your text is going to wrap. But it's going to give you these options: normal, wrap, pre-line. What is that? These are the literal CSS values for the word wrap property. So knowing how these behave, no wrap, it won't wrap. Everything's gonna, if it gets to the end of the line or the length of the object, it's just gonna clip. Pre will put a new line in if you've literally put one in, like if there's an enter in the data. There's a pre-wrap. Inherit, if the parent object has a word wrap property, it will use it. Break word, not 100% sure what that is. Normal is the normal behavior, which means it'll wrap. And then none. And if we click down here and more, there's some additional explanations about what those mean. So, but that's what you're modifying here. You're modifying that CSS property. And knowing that, you could apply this to a label just by creating a rule. Some other things I wanted to point out is fonts. in the web theme builder, we have, if you're using alpha or some alpha-based theme, you can customize the colors and the fonts without having to go into CSS. But specifying this font has to follow the font family rules. So it's a comma delimited list of the fonts you want to use. The one you want to use the most is on the left, and the one that it should fall back to is next, and so on down the line. It's always recommended to end in something like a sans serif or serif, which are use the browser system fonts for whatever those values are, if none of these options are available. So you could have Times New Roman, Courier. For system fonts, you can include Google fonts here, which I've covered in the past. I can that involves also using the font. It's like a function for CSS that says, "Hey, go load this font from this location," and then you also have to provide the font files, the web font files themselves. But Google Web Fonts has thousands of fonts that are available for free. They host them for you, so you don't have to include them, and they give you the code you have to include in your CSS to make sure those fonts are available. So changing this here will change it everywhere. If you're using one of our older themes, you'll have to edit the CSS directly. I do encourage people to upgrade to the new ones, mostly because any new controls that we add are going to use style rules from the alpha theme in current web themes and won't support those older themes, the GR blue and the GR grays. So if you look at here, everything should look either as Times New Roman. Well, actually, it won't look like anything because I didn't put any data in the list. Let's go to layout. Oh, I didn't put any data in the list. Okay, go to the layout, dump that in there real quick, and live preview, and everything should look like old newspaper font now. And it does. So when you're working with your app, adding space, changing font colors, deciding how things are aligned, whether or not you have borders or drop shadows or that kind of thing. The CSS is a good place to start, and working as locally as you can. So in the case of a list, maybe you're working on the field, inline style property, or even the class. In a view box, you might be working with HTML directly. With other controls, text boxes, buttons, radio groups, there is inline style, they're often just called style attributes, where you can add things, experiment with it, and then also within the live preview, being able to have the Chrome debugger there to just muck away with the layout, just to try to experiment with things, to figure out what you want, and then being able to copy that out of there and applying it back where you need it is very, very powerful, very useful. You saw me do it a few times, but you have the ability to turn off rules in here while you're working with it. So maybe something's going wrong and you're not sure what, you can just go in here and like check it, like what's making all that space? Oh, it's this padding property. I don't like that. So maybe I want to remove it off a label. Working in here, it's very, very powerful, very useful to know. And it will help you a lot too. If you're on other websites and you see something that you like, you can use this same approach in the browser, in Internet Explorer. All of them have them now. Not Internet Explorer, Edge. Microsoft Edge has it now. But if we go to one of my favorite sites, Mozilla's website here on CSS here. And go take a look at the references here. It talks about what they're doing, but maybe I really like how their table of contents look, so I can actually, and I know I'm going over time probably. If I get this open, hit F12, I get the console. It's got that same selector tool. Now I can come up here and like click on this box, and you saw that green line. That's That's the margin.
So you learn what colors they use, what fonts
Yeah, so
they
you learn
have,
that's the padding,
the
right?
font
You could turn that
padding, the
off, turn it
structure.
on.
Yeah,
Font size, rems. They use REMs. I don't remember what that is. But uh, you can use this debugger, knowing how it works is very powerful for figuring out what you want, changing things, experimenting.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are out of time. Sarah, thank you very much for presenting today. We couldn't get to all of the questions. If you'd like your question answered sooner rather than later, please send it into guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. I saw that we had a couple that we couldn't get to, and we will be
Yeah.
happy to answer those, so no problem at all. Dion will be back next week, and he'll be presenting as well. If you do have ideas for future topics, you can go ahead and send them also into guides at alphasoftware.com. Thanks very much again to everyone who participated. See you next week. Take care and stay well. Bye-bye.
Bye.